Welcome back to Ultra Uncovered. I'm Corinne Shalvoy here with Russell Ditzworth, and we are super excited to continue talking about Javelina Jundred today with someone who is very familiar with the race, and want to introduce you all to Mr. Dakota Jones. Dakota is one of the most experienced ultra runners out there, as well as a climate activist. He started competing in his early 20s and has wins at some of the most iconic races to his name, such as the Pikes Peak Marathon, Imogene Pass Run, Squamish 50, Broken Arrow 54K, San Juan Solstice, Transvolcania ×2, and of course the Javelina 100, where he won the race in 2022 in a scorching time of 12:58:02. Even with a bit of a costume on. So we'll talk about that. But we are excited to have Dakota here to share his experience and tell you a little bit about his thoughts on Javelina. Thanks for joining us, Dakota.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's really good to be here. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's cool when you say the results like that. I feel like they're really like spaced like 3 years apart, each of them. But that does sound good when you just list them off like that. So thank you very much. I'm excited to join you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, Dakota, you took kind of a hiatus, I would say, from some of the steeper mountain races, and you focused a little bit on doing Western States a couple years in a row. And Javelina was part of that journey. And so I'm just really curious off the front here. What are some of your general impressions of kind of that 2-year experiment and going into some of those races and training that way? Is that something that you're still doing? Like, talk a little bit about that. Just how you kind of went into some of those races with that background.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like set out with this big plan of like doing this type of race versus that type of race. I just generally think of, I prepare for races that inspire me and I get excited about. The reason I ran Javelina in the first place was because I wanted to run Western States, and I had, you can win your way in, the golden ticket. And it's, I've been doing this sport for a really long time, and I'd never ran Western States until 23. And so, I decided like, hey, I want to do that. And Javelina is, I think, kind of the perfect race to try to race your way in, because it's both 100 miles. So you get like a fast 100-mile like experience to train and practice. But also it's in October and Western States is in June, like the people who can win the canyons in April and then still race well at Western States, that's amazing. I don't know if I could pull that off. So Javelina is really nice timing. But also I just think that like what's super cool about trail running is the variety. And so I love steep mountain stuff, and that kind of like hard rock style race is like what's really always most inspired me. But I've always wanted to try to do it all, whether or not I can do it well. And so trying to run a fast 100 was a cool challenge.
Yeah, I failed to mention probably one of the most important results on your resume, which is hard rock. You're third there too, Killian and Francois. That was pretty cool. I was at my parents' house in Ouray and saw all three of you come through the Ouray aid station together, and it was pretty wild to see how fast you guys were moving and, that deep into the race. So that was really, really cool. But that is something that, people think of you. I think, I feel like maybe more as a mountain runner. So, tell me a little bit about like, I think I've heard you say like, you didn't necessarily change up training a ton for Javelina, like maybe you got on some faster stuff, but when it came to like approaching the race on race day, what was your strategy and kind of, did you have any idea on like just general paces you wanted to run? Were you planning to go out, consistent over the course of the 5 loops, or optimize when it's cooler in the day? What was your strategy?
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, I did try to do some specific training for it. Like I wasn't going to like sacrifice the mountain runs that I like to do. And I did some big mountain stuff, but I also just really like running, like not just hiking, And so I'm always happy to, like, a road run's no problem for me. As long if there's no traffic, I don't mind running on the roads at all. And I like going into Javelina, I definitely did track workouts. Like I would go do 5 or 6 mile repeats at a time, like once a week, or I don't know, twice a week maybe. That seems like a lot. I can't remember. Anyway, I did do some specific training. But yeah, going into the race, like I said, I was really trying to win my way into Western States. And so like the time, like I was aware the record at the time was like 13:02 or something. I was aware of that, but like that wasn't the goal. It was like I want to race to get top, I think 2. You have to be top 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also like, oh, this guy's already in and this guy's already in, so it's okay if they beat me, And it was just like kind of by far the fastest 100-mile race that I've done. So there was a lot of unknown there, and I was really curious to see what it would be like to basically be able to run every step of a 100-mile race, which I'd never done before. Yeah, so it's 5 laps. The first lap's a little longer, but then the next 4 are all like 19 and a half miles. And it's interesting. It's a cool challenge. The first lap, it's like everybody's just like trying to be the chillest guy alive, like everybody's trying to, it's like who's the more relaxed competition. And then, but not just guys. I shouldn't say guys. Like I was racing with Heather Jackson and a bunch of like several other women in the first lap. Well, into the second lap actually. But yeah, then in the second lap, it was crazy. Like right before the second lap, right as you come into this, like the start and finish area where there's the big aid station, at the very end of the first lap, we went from being super chill to just like exploding. And I was coming in, we were coming into the aid station and I was like a mile out. So I was like, okay, I have to pee. So I stopped quickly to pee. And it was like, it took me most of the next lap to figure out what place I was in, because everybody stops at different places along like the aid station, and everybody sped up like crazy. And all of a sudden, all the people like Arlen Glick changed his shirt. So I was like, who in the heck is that? And so it was really funny. Like it took me the whole next lap to like figure out even where I was. And that's like where the race really started, I think. I don't know if this answers your question.
Were you getting info from your crew or from other people in terms of placing? Because you're saying like, hey, this is a means to an end. Like, yes, I want to run well here and I'm going to kind of give it my all, but like, it's really a means to an end. And you wanted to know where you were placing wise. And I do remember that being a very interesting race, just from a race dynamic standpoint, especially towards the end with you and John. So talk a little bit about that. Who are you getting info from? And talk a little bit about just that competition piece of like searching for those tickets towards the end.
Yeah, I didn't really get much good info. Definitely not the end of the first lap. Like the info is just useless. Nobody knows what's going on at the aid station. They're all waiting and they see us all come in like crazy, and we all stop at different places because you like go in, but there's a huge long area where you can stop for your crew. And so like my crew didn't know, and they wanted to be there for me. And so that first lap, I didn't have any info. And I did on the second lap, well into the second lap, I was just kind of, I was moving up. I was definitely catching people steadily on that second lap. And I was definitely moving up. But it was like kind of halfway through the second lap that I caught up to Jacob Pusey, who's a friend of mine. He lives in Canada now. And I remember I hung out with him in like 2016 in Canada and did his race, and we had a good time. And I basically haven't seen him since. And so we ran together for several miles, and he knew somehow. And so he was telling me where we were at in the race. And yeah, towards the end of that lap, I passed him and started moving up again. And I really can't remember how exactly I knew, but I was maybe my crew knew, but like by the time I hit the end of the second lap, I came in, I knew that I was in like second place, behind Matt Daniels. And I was like, sweet, I've been moving up slowly. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Just stay where I'm at. No need to be in a rush. I got 3 more laps. And then as I left the aid station, he was walking back. Like he had made it like 20 feet out of the aid station, decided that, I think he was hurt, so he was walking back. And then I was like, oh, okay, shit, here we go. Now it's my race to lose. So high pressure from that point.
Yeah. How would you have kept yourself in it if you knew that, like, hey, say you're like 3rd, 4th, 5th, even, like, people drop out late in these races. Like, totally. How would you just keep yourself in it to know that, like, hey, I just got to stay on it. There's always a chance that something happens to somebody else.
Yeah, I think the key to like running a long distance, like 100 miles well, is you have to be patient. And the more you do this, the more you trust that like things can totally change dramatically after 70 or 80 miles. But when you're at like 20 or 30 or 40 miles and things aren't going the way you want, it's so hard to trust that it can be okay. Especially when you feel like you're doing the plan you kind of wanted but you're not in the position you want to be. It can be pretty bewildering and really hard to stick to the plan. I definitely counsel people who are like new to ultras, like, or to hundreds, of when you like to try to create as much of a plan as you can and like to trust that it's the right plan for you. Definitely get help creating that plan, if you're new to it, but like just like being patient is critical. And so if I left the second onto the third lap after the second aid station, you know what I mean? If I went out on the third lap and I had been in third or fourth or fifth, like I really think that as long as I was running the pace that I was running, I would have been okay, like not too stressed out. And that's kind of what I wanted. I was really hoping everybody was like
I hope somebody
3
goes
to 5 minutes ahead of me, Yeah, exactly. And I don't have to have the pressure of being in front, but I knew my times. I had the watch, I knew where I was at and I knew I was running a good time. I knew my pace was really good. And so I was like, there's no need to stress about this. But then it was funny. It was the opposite problem. It was like all of a sudden I was in first place after running 40 miles. And it was like I have 60 miles to go. And like that's like, again, like kind of the opposite problem where like even if I stick to my plan and I'm doing what I want to do, when you get caught after that, it's like, oh, I blew it, and now I'm screwed. So I didn't want that to happen. And in Javelina, it's a desert. You can see a long way. And so I'm sure that those guys could see me at certain points, but I did not ever look back. Not once. You don't look back. You go forward,
Yeah. So because it is such a fast race, aid stations probably pretty critical. Tell us a little bit about, if you remember, kind of how you approached those. Did you have a set, I'm going to do this at every, you can only be crewed at headquarters. And so those become kind of critical. Of course, you might need to refill bottles or whatever at the other aid stations, but anything that, you feel like was beneficial to you about like efficient aid stops or heat mitigation, what did you do there?
Yeah, I was wearing a bandana around my neck with the ice, and that's essentially it. I had the hats, and I made a point to reapply sunscreen. I was probably the only person doing that. But I don't know. Skincare.
Did you ever did you get hot? I mean, it was a warm year. I don't think it was outlandishly.
I can't complain about the heat. It was like maybe 85 at the most, which is not cold, but it's like, not terribly bad. It's like, it's tough there in Javelina, not so much because of the heat that day, but because the sun is brutal. There's no shade on the course at all. So you're in full sunlight the whole time. And I really think that can eat up some energy and really dry you out. So I was trying to be really on top of hydration and make sure that I was drinking plenty of water, but also like plenty of electrolytes as well. And that the aid stations are great, like, because there's the main aid station where your crew is, but there's also 3 others, I think, out on the course. And they're fantastic. They have plenty of water, plenty of food. And so I didn't take food. I was just eating gels. I think just gels the whole day. But like at each aid station, I was making a point to like cover myself in water and to like take enough. I would sometimes like fill and drink and then fill the bottle, and I would always take 2 to go. And because it's a really runnable course, there wasn't a huge amount of time. Like I want to say like 30 to 40 minutes between each aid station. So I was able to hydrate pretty well. That may be different depending on your pace, but it worked well for me.
Did you find that you had a different pacing strategy based on time of day, like the hottest part of the day versus otherwise, or were you just trying to stay really consistent in your rhythm kind of the whole time?
I was trying to be consistent. I think there's probably merit to like maybe going a little faster when it's cooler or slowing down when it's hot, but it's also, that's a risky strategy because that means you go out hard at the start, and then you like dial it back, and that's really hard to do. And I don't know if I'm like confident enough to do that, but I also think that I'm good enough to like respond to how I feel. And especially when I'm running these races, like there's basically, the way I hit it is like, I know I can run the distance, and I know I can do it at some certain level of intensity. I'm pretty sure. And I always race at like 10 to 15% harder than that. So there's always like a serious level of unknown involved in this. But I expect that intensity does change when it's hotter. It's just a more intense experience, so I probably slow down a little bit. But I was trying to be really consistent, and that's a race where you really can be consistent, and you can like judge your consistency by time in a way that you can't in most ultra marathons. Because like at Hard Rock, the uphill, the downhill is like a vastly different pace. But in Javelina, it's just a gradual uphill for like 10 miles and then a gradual downhill for 10 miles. And so I could not only compare like the overall pace, really, it's like a little slower up and a little faster down, but also like lap to lap. By the time I was in my third, fourth, fifth lap, I was like, I could really compare, see how I was doing.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about, kind of that as you go through the subsequent laps, that first 10 miles, like the small hills kind of grow and become bigger. Yeah. Did you notice, like, did it ever feel like, this is significantly like, I mean, of course you have the miles on your legs, but like, yeah, did you necessarily notice like, oh my gosh, like I got to do the uphill again? Or did you feel like you could really optimize the downhill section at, the second 10 miles?
Yeah, I think that it was kind of nice though, because I by the time it was like the third lap, I knew what to expect. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get to this corner, and then there's this climb, and I was like, there's one section pretty early on, well, after the first aid station on the loop, not the main turnaround, but like the first aid station where there's like a hill, it's like the steepest hill, and it's by most ultra running standards, it's not that big at all. But I was aware of it every time, and it just grinds up, and it's like I ran it every time, but it was increasingly challenging. And it's like I get all bitchy sometimes when I'm like struggling. And so I remember like I think it was with, I don't know, maybe it was the last lap or the second to last lap, but I was like, the sun was setting, and that hill goes straight west, and I like couldn't get my hat low enough and also see, and I was like looking directly into the sun, and I remember just like being so annoyed about that, which is like the dumbest thing. Like obviously nobody's to blame here, and but I was just like tired, and looking for something to be mad about. But really it was, I think that like in that sense, like the repetitive nature of the course was helpful because I knew what to expect, and I knew when it would be over, and when the next one would come, and when I could kind of push. And basically the hardest part for me was the fourth lap, and I think that's almost entirely psychological, because I've done 3 laps, 60 miles, and then I'm doing this fourth lap, and whether I'm going up or down, I know that I have to repeat every step a 5th time, one more time. And so I was tired, and I'd done a lot, and I also had so much more to go, and it was that was challenging for me.
Well, I mean, it proves it out. I think you ran a faster 5th lap, and so obviously like you could really, obviously all of your training, all of your run training led to a really great performance. You were right on course record split, and then made a course record in the midst of it. So, I mean, clearly you've got an aptitude for that type of racing as well. But tell me a little bit about, I do want to hear about that last lap with, I think it was with John, right? And the both of you were kind of competing a little bit back and forth, maybe a little bit of gamesmanship in there, but ultimately, I mean, you came through with a great victory there at the end. What do you remember about that piece of it, and kind of going back and forth with John?
Well, it's funny. I have heard this, that like people think that I was playing some sort of game here. I was playing no game. I was playing flat out the whole day.
Running.
I was doing the best that I could. Like I think that my mom, she's watching the live stream from home, and she was telling me later that like, because like right before the end of the 4th lap, I'd been struggling, and that was like on the 4th lap, that was the only time I walked in the race, and I was like feeling so bad. I was like, okay, I'm gonna let myself walk and eat the gel. I did that like 2 or 3 times, and then towards the end of the 4th lap, I stopped and I walked off the trail to pee, and then I came back and was like, oh shit, there's John. Like I didn't know he was there, and I thought that like I had been running well, and I knew I'd been struggling, but I was like, I've still been doing pretty well, so I think I'm probably good. But I didn't have any updates whatsoever on where anybody else was. I was with a pacer, and actually that's the pro tip if you're trying to race this thing. Is the race is amazing, but there's a ton of people on the course in 2 different races, and you're doing laps the whole time, and you have to pass people constantly. And like having a pacer for the 4th and the 5th laps was critical because I didn't have to say anything. My pacer was always telling people that I was coming, and so the people stepped aside. And so I don't mean that as a criticism of the race. This is just sort of the way it is, and it's super cool that everybody's out there because they're all in like costumes, and it's like everybody's having a great time and partying, and nobody wants to be in the way. Whenever they hear this, they always get out of the way. It's super cool, but you're coming from behind them, so it's critical to have a pacer. Anyway, on that end of the 4th lap, I came back from going to the bathroom, and it was like all of a sudden I'd been passing people constantly, but like in the 100K, or maybe I would lap them in the 100 miles, and then all of a sudden John was there, and I was like, oh god, he's in my race. And so then we came into the end of the 4th lap together, and that's hard, right? Like I've been running in front for 40 miles. Right? Yeah, third and 4th laps, like 40 miles. And then he caught me, and I was like, no. And I've had a tough lap. I'm not feeling very good. And so, I start going through this process of rationalization. We all do. I'm like, okay, well, it's like, just do the best you can. All I need is second, right? My pacer was like, yeah, man, and Arlen's 3rd, and he's already in, so you're good. You just can't get passed by 2 people. So we're all rationalizing here.
Doing the math.
Yeah. But it's like, I feel like one of the things that I'm good at in ultras is that I just like do the best I can in every moment. And sometimes I feel really bad, and sometimes I feel great, but it's like, I'm always like trying to do the best I can with whatever I have. And so John and I came into the turnaround. It's, the main headquarters aid station together, more or less. But there's a huge long area where we do crew. And so my crew was really close to the actual turnaround because it's a tiny little out and back there. And his was somewhere else. I didn't know. And there's a lot of people there, and a lot of other racers coming in and out on different times of their race, or different races. And so we came into this area together, and I got my food and water, and headlamp, and then started out, and I never saw him again. like there was nothing. I didn't mean to play a game. I just didn't see him. He must have been stopped with his crew, and I didn't see him, and I ran out. And I was pretty sure that I was in front of him, but I was like, as I came out, I was like, he's right here with me. We're racing together. Don't worry about it. Just do the best you can. Don't ever look back. That's rule number 1, And it was really interesting to see the psychology change from the 4th lap, where I was like, it's so long, and I don't know if I can hang on, and I'm tired. But the 5th lap, it was like, I've done a good job, and like, there's nothing to lose here. Just go for it, right? And so I didn't consciously speed up, but I was like, do not look back, do not slow down, just continue forward, whatever you can. And I was with Eric Sensman, if you know him, he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he was pacing me, and he was helping me with letting people know. And I don't know, after we got to the first aid station, John hadn't caught us, and I was like surprised, but like, okay, well, I don't know where he is. We're not looking back, but doing good here. And then I like climbed up over this hill, and then by the time I got to the point where I knew I was at the high point, I did look back, and I was like, he's not there. And Eric's like, you got to fucking go. And it was that was one of the coolest moments, I think, for me in like ultra running ever, because I had run like basically almost 90 miles at that point, and I was in first place, and I felt awesome, and I was like, let's do it. And so then we really turned it on, and it was super cool. Like I don't think you get a whole lot of experiences like that in sport or in life, and like to be able to have run 90 miles and then to push like sub 7-minute pace for like the last 10 miles, and to feel good and feel excited and just like nothing to lose, and just to like really stride out was a really, really cool experience. And even in the moment, I was like doing the best I can, working really hard, but I was like trying to enjoy it. Like, this is special. Like, you don't get this very often. And so, yeah, I don't know. There wasn't so much like you said gamesmanship. It wasn't conscious. I mean,
you were just trying.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, think about like, tell me a little about, you say do the best you can in the moment. What does that mean? Does that mean the next like 2 minutes? Does that mean Do you think of it in like, hey, the next mile, I want to do the best I can in the next mile. I'm going to forget about everything else. Like what chunks do you think of that in, or is it just like, how do you think about
Yeah.
that? Because I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people can take something from that because it's easy to just look at like, man, I got like 50 miles left. Well, like, yeah, I'm gonna walk right
Mhm.
now because I've got so much left. But it's like, can you do a little bit better in the moment?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't think I chunk it out. That might be a good strategy, to be like, okay, just get to that rock, get to that tree, that mile or whatever. I think that's a worthwhile strategy. But for me, it's like more of a continuum. I'm like, I really like I don't use a heart rate monitor, and I really race on like perceived efforts, and that's how I train and everything. And so like I use a watch, but when I'm doing intervals, I'm not like checking my pace or something. I'm just like, how hard can I go for this time? And it's the same in a race. Like the effort level is what I'm looking for. And because I've done so many races, I feel like I have an idea of what kind of effort level I should be able to sustain. And that's useful whether I'm having a good race or a bad race. Because if I'm having a bad race, I'm going slowly, but I can still do the same effort level, really.
Right.
And it's like the
Still
output
just as
is
hard.
not as yeah, exactly. The output is not as good as when I'm having a bad race or a good race, but like when I'm having a bad race, I'm still trying to maintain that intensity. And like sometimes it changes dramatically. Like I just ran the CCC in Chamonix 100K race in last August, and I didn't feel very good. I didn't have a great first half, but I just kept trying the best I could. And then like 50K, yeah, like halfway through, I started to feel amazing, and I really turned it
Mhm.
on for a long time. Then I kind of blew up again, but um, yeah,
I
like
think you ended up third, so you didn't blow up fully.
no, that was the year before. I got ninth, which is not bad. I'm happy with
Oh,
that.
ninth, still
But
ninth
yeah,
essentially in the world is yeah, not
but
bad,
thank
not
you.
bad.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Um,
answers your question, but it's like I just really go off the intensity and
yeah.
just trying to like be honest with myself. Like you say, it's like I'm so far to go and this is gonna be really hard. But it's like, can I give it a little bit more? Or would that be genuinely too much? And I just like trust that I'm not lazy. I think I've proven to myself that even though I often want to stop, like I'm not lazy, I'm gonna work hard. But when I don't want to continue to do this, there's usually a good reason. My body is like, hey man, it's too much. And so I really try to like thread that needle or whatever analogy you want, where it's like pushing the best that I can, but also like really responding to what I need. Because if you don't respond to the needs when you have like 50 miles to go, then you suffer.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. So for those who care to check it out, your race is on Strava, and
oh yeah,
it's
nice.
overall 7:41 pace. And so I was just noting that at the very end there, I mean, you're running like 7 flat and then a 6:51 mile 98. So obviously, like you were feeling good and you had enough left to really
It's like
turn it on there,
downhill
which was
yeah,
it
to be
is, but
fair.
it's still amazing because it's mile 98. I mean, come on, like that's
Yeah,
crazy. But
thanks.
yeah, it's just really cool to see, and it is such a consistent. Like you were extremely consistent throughout the entire thing, which I think at least in my looking at other people who have raced like that tends to be. I was comparing some people's first lap to how they did finish time, and a lot of times like if they are too hot in the first lap, then
Mm.
it doesn't translate to them running necessarily an overall fast time. I mean that's all relative, but yeah, it's just really cool to see the consistency. I think it's definitely a kind of a lesson in what you should aim for if you're trying to hit a time at the race. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that race especially, I feel like pace can play more of a role than most ultras. Usually, like in
Yeah.
the mountains, the pace is irrelevant, kind of, because the up and down is so different. But yeah, Javelina is pretty
Right.
runnable, which is pretty cool. It'd be interesting to compare like my pace or splits to John's from last year, because John
Mm-hmm.
Rea, I beat him and got the course. I got the course record in 22, but he then broke my course record last year by like 15 minutes. It was a stunning time. Um, I'd
Mm-hmm.
be interested to see how those splits compare. If he was really
Yeah.
consistent or if he like maybe had one amazing lap or something.
Yeah, where he made that up. And yeah, I think I did hear him, and maybe I don't know, maybe you can chime in on this too, but in terms of training, like I think I've heard him say that he ran a lot of long runs kind of at goal race pace. I don't know, is that something you think like is helpful in training to run like at, whether it's just kind of like a moderate or tempo type effort for a really long distance to get used to just continually running? Or any thoughts on like how you feel is best to kind of get your body ready for having to consistently run for that long?
Yeah. I mean, I should like preface this, like, I think that like I'm not a coach, and um, being a good runner and being a good coach are very different skills. um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. My thoughts are generally that, yeah, like train the way you're gonna race, and so doing like tempo runs at race pace like really gets you into that habit of like running at that pace and seeing what that's like, and trying to maybe hit like the similar kind of climbs and descents as the race you're gonna run really helps. I think a really typical, like a really good run that I did was like a 40-mile run around from Salt Lake City, and it was like it's funny. Like I think everybody in Salt Lake saw this run on Strava, and they were like laughing at me, or like, "What in the hell is he doing?" Because it's like a road bike ride, basically. And the second half, I got on the trails, but it's like I went up Emigration Canyon, which is a road bike ride, and then down to the other side away is just like nobody runs that. But it was really consistent pace, and actually I think super relevant for Javelina. And then the second half, I like did some more vertical and got on the trails. But still, yeah, I think that like getting out there and like actually getting used to like being tired, but also being able to still try to hit that pace is important. I also think that trail runners, ultra runners, as a general rule, have a epidemic of overtraining, and so I don't want people to go out there and do like huge mileage and like try to hit like, I don't know, hit their splits after like 150 miles a week or something, or 100 miles a week, whatever. Because, especially when you're really trying to run for 100 miles, you can't get away with hiking the way you could in like some more mountain race. And so if you don't show up rested, then you're going to really suffer. So there's a balance there, right? Like definitely do some runs at pace, but also you can always have too much of a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I think I don't have any other Javelina questions, but we have just a few other questions just about kind of you and Nnormal, if you have just a couple more minutes for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it. Oh, but first, when did the ears come out? Because I don't know. I don't think you were wearing the ears the whole time, were you?
No, I was. Yeah, I had. I sewed the ears on the top of the hat because it's Halloween and everybody's wearing a costume. And somebody told me, I remember talking to somebody before the race, and somebody's like, "Oh yeah, that's a cool race, but none of the elites ever wear costumes. It's lame." And I was like, "I'm not lame. Check this out." And so we sewed these little like felt cat ears onto the hat, and then we took makeup and drew little whiskers on my face, which was fun. The whiskers kind of smeared over time with sweat and sunscreen, but it was a cool thing. Yeah, I should have worn a tail. That would have been better.
It was great. It was a great costume. I think everyone appreciated it, especially people on the live stream. They were like, "Yes, here's your costume."
Nice.
Definitely. I am curious. The Nnormal team has kind of got athletes across all over. I'm really curious what kind of the team dynamic is. I know you guys have had some camps and some different things. Like, do you follow like the Golden Trail and like Eloise and his running that's happening there, or Ali Ostrander and what she's doing? Like, I'm just real curious about like the team dynamic, because there are a lot of like very interesting athletes that I think are out there to follow that are associated with Nnormal, and I was just curious to your thoughts there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Nnormal's awesome. I really can't speak highly enough of them. They've been really, really good to me. And like the brand as a rule, like we just share a lot of the same, all the same values. It's super, super cool to get to be part of that team. And we're not able to get together in person a whole lot. Like we did have a really cool team camp in Chamonix last year in 2023.
Okay.
But we didn't do that this year. It's a pretty expensive thing to do, I think, to get everybody together. And we're not always at the same races. And like you say, like people are doing a lot of different things. And so like I haven't been at a Golden Trail race this year. Ali hasn't been at any of my races, but it's not that they don't care. And so we have a WhatsApp chat for the team. And the team manager, Mireya, is really, really good about like sending at the start of each week, like, hey, everybody, here's what's going on. You know, Ali's doing this race and Eluzine's doing this race and so on. Dakota's doing this race. Here's a project. Here's some other interesting things. And so we're always like kind of chatting and supporting each other. And then we have like a base camp thing where we get to hear about other people's projects in detail. And so like, while we don't chat like every day or something, and we haven't been together in person, like I actually haven't even met Eluzine in person, I still feel like I communicate with them quite a lot. And it's been really, really fun to follow because we only have like 5 or 6 people on the team, you know, so it's not a whole lot of people.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to clear up how does one pronounce the name, the brand? We want to make sure we're right. Are we correct when we're saying Nnormal?
It's just Nnormal. Yeah. This is a common question. Okay. You are not stupid. Everybody has this question for me. It's just Nnormal, not Nnormal or Nnormal or something. It's the normal way.
Normal it is.
But like this is a common thing, and I don't know if this is like part of their marketing strategy to make unpronounceable names for everything, or if this just happens. But they like asked me to make a video this year. They're like, dude, can you make a video about how to pronounce the shoe models? And I was like, sure, yeah. Let me just
know that too.
I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah, because there's 2. One, which is the Tomir. And Tomir is pretty straightforward, but the other one is a KJERAG. Yeah. And I was like, cool, I'll do that. But also, can I double check? How do you pronounce that one? And they were like, the team manager was like, not sure. Let me ask my boss. And then she was like, my boss isn't sure either. Let's ask somebody else. And eventually I was like, okay, I'll handle this. And I reached out to Emily Forsberg, who's Norwegian. No, sorry, she's Swedish. But the Kjerag is a peak in Norway. That's where the name comes from. And that's kind of the idea. Tomir is a peak in Majorca, where Nnormal's based. Kjerag is a peak in Norway, where Killian and Emily live. And that's what she said. She was like, it's something like Kjerag. She said it with a sort of better accent, but Kjerag is enough.
Sure.
Which is amazing because it doesn't look like that at all. But no. Fun little insider info there.
Yeah, totally. No, but I think it's actually kind of brilliant because like you're saying from a marketing standpoint, it's like it makes it super memorable. Like everybody's like, nobody knows how to pronounce this. And so they remember what it looks like or how it's spelled or whatever.
True,
I think it actually
it's a talking point.
It's a smart move. Yeah, for sure. So, and then just, I think Russ wants to know what it's like having a goat like Killian as a boss.
Yeah, that's
Does
what
he
I
act as a boss? He's a team member and a boss? How's that work?
I'm always like, man, if I screw up this race, my boss is gonna be pissed. Oh man. No. I mean, honestly, Killian is brilliant. Mostly because he knows what he's good at and he knows what he's not good at, and you know, he just doesn't. He has 2 kids and a third on the way, and he's training all the time, and he does all these other things. He's the Killian Jornet Foundation. And he just doesn't have experience like actually like running the commercial side of a business. And so when he started Nnormal, he worked with Camper, which has a bunch of resources for designing shoes. And they together built this amazing team of people to run the business. So Killian's on the WhatsApp chat and the base camp and stuff, and we see messages from him, but he's not like running the show on a day-to-day basis. From my perspective, you know, there's a CEO, there's several marketing managers, there's the commercial managers, the product line people, and I interact with them in a bunch of different ways, like product stuff or like going to events for commercial stuff, and lots of marketing. But it definitely feels a lot more like Killian's a teammate than a boss. Although I think
that's cool.
I do think he's like the owner. I'm not sure how the money works. Yeah. It's with Camper too, but I'm pretty sure he's got a big business stake in it
somehow.
Yeah, exactly. He's the man. But it is cool. Like Killian is by far the greatest of all time, and like
and I wonder if
he's someone I respect a ton.
Yeah, I wonder like if you have to imagine that his time being a sponsored athlete and kind of living in that world for so long, you know, maybe kind of informs how he acts when he's on the other side of it. And, you know, there's a team under him. And if some of the things that like annoyed him when he was a sponsored athlete, he's like, we're not doing this as, you know, on Team Nnormal or whatever, or I just want to be, you know, part of the team. And I don't know. It's just, I would imagine that he took a lot of kind of I guess, learnings from all the time with Solomon on maybe how he wanted this to look a little bit
Yeah,
different for
I'm
the
sure he
athletes.
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a pretty quiet guy, so I haven't heard him like expound specifically on that. But I mean that must be true, of course. And
Yeah.
he runs the brand or works with the brand in really cool ways. And I know that he's like talking with them, the product designers and the commercial team and the marketing team, like every day. He's really heavily involved. And he's like specifically like such a technical guy, so he's giving a ton of advice and feedback on gear especially. Um, and so whenever they're talking about some new product, you always hear like, okay, well they've made the test shoes for the CEO and Killian. It's like that's who's gets the very first round of everything, and it's really cool. I mean, I think that they've done a great job with creating good products, but also with like creating a really cool story around the products and genuinely following through on initiatives like the No Trace program where you can recycle your products. So that's all led by Killian's ideas.
That's awesome. One of my most favorite things that you've done, and I loved that you mixed kind of like your passion for advocacy with a race, and you rode your bike to the Pikes Peak Marathon and won the Pikes Peak Marathon. The most impressive part of that in my mind was the descent record, but also just the fact that you mixed in, biking there and having that be part of the story and allowing that to give you a platform to talk about. I think you were talking about at that time mostly about Protect Our Winters, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about like how you think about those things. Do you have projects like that you think about in the future, or like what like talk about that piece of it. I really love that you did that. It's one of my favorite things that you've done.
Well, thanks, Russell. I appreciate that. It was awesome. Yeah, 2018, rode my bike like 250 miles each way to Pikes Peak, and
Yep.
it went well. Like it literally went as well as it possibly could have. I was like, I'm gonna ride my bike up here and talk about it, and then I won the race, and then I rode back, and it's like I got all this attention, and we raised like $11,000 for Protect Our Winters, and it was just a really cool effort and a really cool like initiative to get started, I think, in climate activism, trying to use the platform that I have as a runner to do more than just run and win races and whatever. But also I think it was most productive for me as a learning experience that it wasn't enough and it wasn't the right thing to do. As in, that's maybe the wrong way to say it. It wasn't a bad thing to do, but I think that it's wrong. No, it's definitely wrong to suggest that like the solution to climate change is you have to stop driving and start riding your bike to every race you do and everything you do. That's not realistic. People have jobs and they have families, and if you want to provide for them and survive, like most people can't do that. And especially if you want to race like in Europe and you're American, right? Like this doesn't make sense, right? And the thing is that like all the solutions that will allow us to maintain our modern conveniences and move away from a fossil fuel society is they already exist. That's what's most important, and they all need to be improved, of course. But the main foundation of what we need already exists, and what lacks is the cooperation to implement these solutions. And so basically, a project like riding my bike to a race was a really nice gesture, and it was a cool spectacle that raised money for Protect Our Winters. But I think the biggest takeaway for me was it led me to create this running camp called Footprints. And we just wrapped up our fourth camp a few weeks ago as I speak to you now. But the point behind Footprints was like when I'm looking at my Pikes Peak trip, it was like that was worth it because I have this platform and like I was able to do this thing and like tell this story and use it to raise money for an organization that's doing really good work. Not everybody can do that. So what we need to do is find ways to empower other people with the skills and the circumstances and the resources that they have so that they can like use their platform the way that I use mine. Because everybody has a platform and a community. Everybody's capable of making a difference, but a lot of us don't really know how. And so Footprints is all about trying to help you do that. And so we work with a bunch of mentors who are experts in all kinds of climate justice activism, whether it's legal stuff or business development or science. There's a whole list of ways to address climate change, and our mentors are the people who are really driving the show about how to make the best use of your resources during the week of the camp. And everybody is meant to come away with like an idea for how they're going to make a difference in their community for climate justice specifically, because it's not enough to just change the technologies, but we have to make sure that we have a just transition to new technologies. So yeah, we've done 4 camps now, and it feels really, really good to get to help people try to make a difference for their communities. And
so you just had
also,
a camp recently, but if somebody was
yeah.
interested, how would they reach out and find out more about it?
Yeah, so our website is runfootprints.org. And that's exactly how it sounds, runfootprints.org. We also have an Instagram. We post a lot of stuff on Footprints Running at our Instagram there. That's a really good way to get involved. And we've been posting a bunch of stuff there, some photos and videos, and we'll definitely come out with a whole lot more content. Our next camp will be next year, and we'll open the applications for that in the early part of the new year. But really our goal now is like to support the campers with their projects year round. So like everybody just had a really great week, an inspiring week. Everybody's motivated after 1 week at camp, but it's like, how do we really help people continue once you get back in your own habits at home? And I think we have some really cool ways to do that. And we're going to be telling people more about how we do that, because we really want this to be as open source as possible. Like we want anybody to be able to do this work, whether or not they can come to a camp. And yeah, I'm going to definitely keep riding my bike to races and doing more spectacles like this, because it's fun. And also it's a great way to get attention for these other things that I think make the real difference.
Yeah. It's super cool because I love the concept, because it's like the best of like all worlds. It's like kind of like a little bit of like a corporate strategy session. And then it's like trail running and hanging out with like-minded people and like community building and all of that. And I have to imagine like a lot of the runs you guys go on are probably helpful in like just generating the creativity too and stuff. And, maybe coming up with ideas while you're out on the runs during the camps, which super cool. So yeah, thank you for doing all that work. And it's an awesome initiative.
Oh, we really appreciate it. Yeah, it feels really good. Like trail running is about so much more than just times. And it's really fun to come on here and like talk about my race. I had a great race at Javelina, and I love that. And I want to keep racing. We should always like be excited about competition, but it's, the sport is so much more than just competition. And that's what I love so much about it. And so when we're able to like help people use the sport as a context to do something much bigger than sport, that feels like success to me.
Well, Dakota, I think that's a great place to wrap it up here. Really appreciate and thank you for your time to come on, talk about Javelina, and hear more about some of the things that you're involved with, both with Nnormal and with the Footprints running camps and Protect Our Winners. So thank you so much. Appreciate all your time, and look forward to seeing what else you have going in the future.
Thanks a lot. It's an honor to chat with you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Dakota. Take care.
All right. See ya.